Namaskar, good evening. Thank you for being here with us this evening for a fascinating conversation, I hope, with one of the doyens of Indian science and much more. I have with me Sudipto Das. Sudipto is a writer of 4 books. 3 of them are non-fictions before this, so they are all non-fiction, and this is his first non-fiction. The previous ones were fictions, the Ecos clan, the Aryabhatta clan, and Broken Amoretti, right? And his latest book is a brilliant biography of Jagadish Chandra Bose, and it's got a very intriguing subtitle, The Reluctant Physicist. Sudipto and I went to the same school. The first 2 schools and colleges were the same, but the similarity ends right there. And he went on to do many more interesting things. As you heard, he is a doyen of India's semiconductor industry. He is a brilliant musician, and he has harnessed the power of tech to for good for those who are socioeconomically marginalized, particularly during the pandemic. Sudipto, if I may just kick things off. First, a very big thanks for this absolutely fantastic biography that you have written. And I think it brings out the nuances of the kind of polymath of a personality that J.C. Bose was. He lived in the best of times and the worst of times in some ways. Could you tell us a little bit about the very interesting cusp of history when Jagadish Chandra Bose started out on his fantastic career?
Yes. Jagadish Chandra Bose lived a very long life, almost 80 years, but the time period which I covered, mainly 1890s till 1910. So these 2 decades were, I would say, in some way, it symbolized a lot of things. First of all, I believe the most important things that happened during these 20 years was that wireless and electricity were invented. And I believe after the industrial revolution of the late 18th century, when steam engine was invented, this was the biggest thing, wireless and electricity. And if you see, after that, the entire geopolitics of the world was somehow related to wireless and electricity. And if you just look back, everything that happened in the world in the last 120 years happened, somehow they are related to electricity or wireless. And so from that point of view, actually, the second industrial revolution happened during this time. And also there were ominous signs during these 2 decades of several big events which happened over the next 100 years. Like the signs were very apparent that World War is going to happen, because England was fighting with the Dutch and the French in Africa. They were fighting with the Russians in Afghanistan, which is known as the Great Game. And I believe there are other ominous signs that world is not going in the right direction, meaning there would be some multinational warfare, which eventually happened in 13-14 years, which is in World War I. And more importantly, also across the world, the extractive and the non-inclusive, the colonial rules that were happening across the world had picked up, meaning the extraction and the non-inclusiveness of all the colonial rules across the world attained a certain level that it was very obvious that something was going to happen, and it happened, right? Like India got independent, and between the 40s and 50s, almost all the countries which were ruled by the European colonies were freed. And the ominous signs of this revolution or this freedom was also visible, like in India between 1890 and 1910. we saw signs that the Swadeshi movement would happen, and it did happen. I mean, 1905.
So
the Bengal
one of
partition,
the,
yes.
I think, the great thing about Sudipto's biography of Jagadish Bose is he weaves in this grand historical background brilliantly into the narrative. Just staying on that historical question, Sudipto, Jagadish Bose also represents within the flow of Indian history and Bengal's history almost the pinnacle of Bengal's Renaissance. One which starts with Raja Ram Mohan Rai and carries on right through Rabindranath. And Rabindranath and Jagadish Bose were contemporaries. Would you like to throw some light on this and how Jagadish Bose was also a product of this Bengal Renaissance and not just a scientist?
Okay. So, I mean, this 20 years, right, it was also sort of the confluence of so many people, like Swami Vivekananda going to Chicago in 1893, and Rabindranath Tagore also coming, out as more than a poet. Like he's, social activism, he's, social entrepreneurship, right? A lot of things which finally led to the self-reliance, movement for India, and also most importantly, science. So, today science education is sort of granted. I mean, we cannot imagine our education system without science, but we don't even know that British government very consciously they kept the higher education in science out of reach for Indians. And Jagadish Bose was the first Indian scientist of modern India. He was also the first Indian science professor. So before him, the Presidency College had only non-Indian and white people who could teach science. And he was the first person who has realized that self-reliance cannot come only through warfare and independence. Self-reliance comes through science and innovation. And during 1880s or 1890s, when I believe first thing in people's mind was how India can become independent. During that time, a person thinking that science technology is also important, and also not in a way which is exclusive of the West. The most important thing about Jagadish Bose and where the Renaissance effect comes into picture, he wanted to reinvent and look back. He wanted India to gain its position in science which it had in the ancient times, but not being exclusive of the West. He wanted the West and the Indian science to go hand in hand. At the time when Indians were not allowed to do science, a person thinking that Indians and the West should go hand in hand in science. So I believe, of course, it was an epitome of Renaissance, because, Renaissance is all about rebirth, right? In reinventing the past and also using that as a binding force to create, modern, nations. Like one of the impact of Renaissance is that we have the birth of nations. That was there. He not only wanted to invent science, he also wanted to unite the entire India on some cultural basis. So, a lot of us, we might not know that the amazing poetry collection like Katha, which was dedicated to Jagadish Chandra Bose, and it was a collaboration between Rabindranath Tagore and Jagadish Bose. And in my opinion, in whatever little I have studied, I have researched, that was the first time any literary work was created which united the entire vast expanse of India from east to west and from north to south on a cultural basis. So you had stories from Shivaji, from Tegh Bahadur, lot of Buddhist stories, and also you had a story from Chitrangada, from Manipur. During that time, uniting like Maharashtra with Manipur, with with Punjab, and also stories from the south, and creating a sphere where the entire India can be united. So that's what Jagadish Chandra Bose did, and there are a lot of other things. I think so. This is the most important thing. So I thought I will bring it up.
That is really this is not a very well-known facet. The collaboration of Rabindranath Tagore and Jagadish Chandra Bose on such an important book of pedagogy almost,
Yes.
nationalist
Yes.
pedagogy.
Yes.
In one of your recent Instagram reels, you have also spoken about Jagadish Chandra Bose's house and Jagadish Chandra Bose Institute
Yes.
incorporating elements of Indian design, of Buddhist design, etc.
Yes, yes.
So that
The first exhibition of Ajanta paintings happened in Jagadish Bose's home. In fact, like the paintings of Ajanta caves were not known. I mean, something around in 1908, one English woman who took the pain of doing a sort of expedition to Ajanta, and Nandalal Bose was part of that group who actually went there, stayed there for a few months, and painstakingly recreated the paintings. And then and the Jagadish Chandra Bose was also there, and for a few weeks with Sister Nivedita. And when the paintings were brought back to Calcutta, the first exhibition happened in his home, and the Viceroy's wife was also invited. So I believe, these are the things that which sort of defines Jagadish Bose, right? A scientist, but also at the same time a very nationalistic art aficionado, right? Who wanted to revive the ancient Indian arts form, where obviously the inspiration comes from Sister Nivedita, who I would say the mother of the modern Indian school of art. And the Bose Institute, if you go and see now, like it looks like an art museum, from the artifacts, from the motifs, from the symbol. The Bojro, the symbol of Bose Institute is Bojro, which is a very typical Buddhist motif. So, I think being scientist is, I think, one of his identities. But apart from that, there are a lot of other things, especially the art and literature.
We will dive into Bose the scientist in a moment. I just, in one of your previous interviews, you have mentioned that Sunil Ganguly's especially Prothom Alo and Sei Shomoy were sort of influences or inspirations behind your approach to Jagadish Bose's biography. And I think it shows in the exquisite research that you have done on this book. Tell us a little bit more about the literary influences that have inspired you.
Yes, absolutely. I think like from the very beginning, I wanted to write a biography which would read like Prothom Alo or Sei Shomoy, because I didn't want to write a very academic form of biography which was already available. I mean, there are some very technical, very academic biographies, but I wanted to write a biography which would read like a story, and for non-scientific audience, though it's a biography of a scientist, there would be some references of science, but I think Shulin Gangobade has shown the way very nicely, that you can write about anything, but it can be very lucid, it would read like a story. So one was that, but the tougher part of that is the background research, right? People who have read Prothom Alo, right? It reads so nice because you actually visualize the background, what is happening in 1820s and 30s, what's happening in Calcutta, right? What food they are eating, what type of clothes they were wearing, and what type of music they were listening, right? So all these very small, insignificant things that happen around us, like we heard about history of fragrance and food, like in the previous session, right? So those are the things which make a thing appear very interesting. So
I call it the Downton Abbey effect.
Yes,
because
exactly.
Downton Abbey, those of you who are Downton Abbey fans will realize there's enormous amount of background details on cars, on food. Everything changes as the decades change. Again, it's a plug for Sudipto's book. It's beautifully written. It's a compelling read. You'll never get bored for a minute. And I think the way it flits back and forth between time is almost a novelistic fictional device rather than kind of straightforward chronological biography. So that's absolutely brilliantly done. Tell us a little bit about the very intriguing subtitle of your book, Reluctant Physicist. Why do you think Bose was a reluctant physicist? Was he a reluctant scientist too?
Okay, so of course he was not a reluctant scientist, but yes, why physicist? He researched in physics only for 4 years, from 1896 to 1900, and the rest of the life he dedicated towards plant. So he is the father of something called plant neurobiology. So now it's an accepted field that plants also have a sort of nervous system. Now plant cognition, which is again since the 90s, this thing of non-human intelligence, or which we call now artificial intelligence, right? Anything which is non-human, we generally term it as artificial, right? But Bose, almost 120 years back, he was talking about, again, non-human intelligence, but which is not artificial, which is natural. So, I mean, and since the last 2-3 decades, since we have these neural networks and artificial intelligence, this plant cognition has become very important. So 30 plus years of his life, he did just plants. Only 4 years he did physics, and again, since his childhood, he was a naturalist. He loved plants, animals, rivers. I mean, he was a horse rider. He was a rower. Like he rode in Ganga and in oceans, right? Like he was a hunter. So I mean, he was a person who loved the nature. And incidentally, what happened? Like in Saint Xavier's, he had somebody called Father Lafont, another amazing personality that Calcutta should be proud of. So Father Lafont was a physics aficionado, and then I think he influenced a lot, Jagadish Bose to take up physics. And again, as the luck might happen, he went to England to study medicine, but he had Kalajar and the scent of chloroform and all those things on the dissection table created problem for him, so he couldn't do medicine. So reluctantly, he went to Cambridge, and there he registered to study what at that time used to call the natural science tripos, which include physics, botany, and maths. So that's how he went there, and there also he got somebody like Father Lafont. I mean, some physics teacher who took this young, adventurous, guy from rural Bengal under their tutelage. So reluctantly he studied physics, but as he was a naturalist by heart, his heart and soul was in plants and animals and rivers and all these things. So I mean, I think fate brought him back to the plants and animals. So.
But I think for many Bengalis, many Indians, there is this feeling that Jagadish Chandra Bose was almost duped of the credit of having invented wireless or the radio. To what extent does your research throw light on? Was it a myth? Is it, or there is an element of truth in that?
Yes, it is true. So now if you go to Wikipedia, now Marconi is no longer considered to be the inventor of radio. So they have acknowledged that Nikola Tesla and Jagadish Bose both are co-inventors of radio, along with Marconi and also many other people. And in fact, interestingly, the first claim to fame of Marconi was this transatlantic wireless transmission in 1901, which was, very, I think, after detailed examination and also after, sort of a lot of forensic investigation, it was proved that Marconi had used Jagadish Bose's receiver and Nikola Tesla's transmitter. So this part is very clear. So I believe it is no longer a myth, and also I mean, it has been acknowledged everywhere that the frequency that 5G communication uses, which the gigahertz frequency, and for which they use something called millimeter waves, which is nothing but electromagnetic or radio waves of few millimeter in length, was also first used by Jagadish Bose in the 1890s. So the 5G communication that the entire world is depending on, like that also the genesis of the wireless communication which you see in 5G also goes back to J.C. Bose, and these are well-known facts. I mean, I didn't research all these things because in academic circle it is well-known. But I think I feel that even like proud Bengalis who are proud about their heritage also don't know about all these facts which are well known and which have been academically acknowledged. So I think I feel that bringing all these things out for a common layman would be nice, right? So there is, it's not a myth anymore. I mean, this is true.
Before I open it out to the audience, I'm sure there are many questions bubbling away. A question that I really want to put to you is, again, going back to your very meticulous research. Our culture is not very focused on preservation of documents or even, our buildings, monuments. We have a particular challenge. I mean, I'm not making a value statement. It's, how some cultures are. Western culture places an enormous value on written records and preserving buildings and monuments. We probably don't. From an academic researcher's perspective, did you face any challenge in terms of collecting materials or locating materials, sourcing materials, getting everything lined up?
The only challenge was accessing old Indian newspapers. Like till date, I don't know where to get the first edition of Times of India from 1838 or the first edition of Jugantar, first edition of Anandabajar Putrika. But I have access to all the editions of New York Times, Times London, or any insignificant small, some tabloid paper from Scotland, right? So I believe, yes, getting archival access of Indian newspapers is a big problem. At least I haven't figured out a way to surmount that. So yes.
No, this is a really interesting thing that you touch upon, because during my PhD research, a lot of it is on sort of 1930s newspapers of Britain, and everything is available at the click of a button. I mean, all of it. I mean, from, as you said, very, very insignificant journals to the Times. It's searchable. You can, and that's the beauty of it. So there is something for us to consider here in Kolkata in a literature festival. We'll like to invite questions. I'm sure a number of hands have gone up. So starting in the front row, and then we will take two quick questions. The lady in red and then the gentleman there.
Thank you. This was a very... working?
It is working. Yeah. Just hold it close.
This was a very engaging session. I had read that Jagadish Chandra Bose was very interested in science fiction.
Oh,
he used to collect science fiction, and he tried writing some.
Yes,
and
yes,
apparently this was an interest encouraged by his Cambridge supervisor as well. So if you could shed some light.
So Sudipto, can we just take 3 questions and then you respond?
Fine.
Yeah, ma'am, if you could.
Your book is very interesting indeed, and I really enjoyed reading it. My question is also something which this, I think, discussion was started with, which is the subtitle of The Reluctant Physicist. So that's what my question is about. Basically, he transcended, I think, the narrow confines within which different disciplines used to be constrained, and he had an interdisciplinary mind. And I think as someone who's now recognized as one of the pioneering biophysicists, and who taught physics in Presidency College throughout his professional life, would it then be correct to call him a reluctant physicist? Because his love for physics, and he was such a committed, dedicated researcher in physics, as long as he was working on those 4 years. But he stayed with physics all his life. So that was my question.
That's a great question.
That was my question.
Thank you. I'm Indranil. Again, I really liked the discussion. As a physics lover myself, somewhat related to your question, you mentioned that a lot of contemporaries were like, Nikola Tesla and other people. So if you could maybe share some information about, like, was he in correspondence with these people? Okay. Or, for example, maybe Tesla, Niels Bohr, Einstein, of course, right? So if you can maybe share some stories, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Do buy the book. They're
Yeah,
all
so
in the book.
pointing, I have not read the book. I plan
Yes,
on
I'll
doing
do.
that, but if you could just share something.
Sure, I'll
else.
do that.
Yeah, thank you.
So first about the first question, right? Yes. So Jagadish Chandra Bose was a mountaineer. He was a trekker. So apart from the science fiction, he also wrote world's first Himalayan travelogue in any language, in Bangla, which is the travelogue that he wrote was about his search, and in Bangla it's called Bhagirathir Utsra Sandhane, and that was actually a trek to the Pindari Glacier, which happens to be the like the origin of the Pindari River, which is one of the channels for Ganga, like Alakananda, Mandakini, Bhagirathi, and also Pindari. So that's one, and also he wrote one of the first science fictions in any Indian languages. So I was trying to figure out if that can be the first science fiction in India, but there are a few other contenders, one in Bangla and one in Marathi. So, but of course, he wrote one of the first science fictions in Indian languages, but he did write the first ever Himalayan travelogue in any language. The next Himalayan travelogue in English, which came at least a year later than this Bhagirathi Rutshandane. Now about the physics thing, yes, the last paper that he wrote on physics was 1901. After that, he never wrote any paper. Like if you go and see the paper submitted in the the Royal Society, after 1901, all his papers were what he used to call, see at that time this plant neurobiology or all these things are not there. So he had to submit the things in botany. But the problem is that he was more interested in biophysics, right? So he totally dismissed the division between biology and botany and physics, right? So he used to research on botany, but using instruments which used a lot of the principles from physics. So he invented a lot of very intricate instruments which were absolutely unheard of in the research of botany. So I think also seeing his letters and also seeing his lectures, right? I mean, it's very apparent that his love is plants, animals, nature. So throughout his life, yes, he taught physics because that was his vocation, right? He had to, for earning, right? He couldn't have got a lecturership for botany, right? So, and he had his job to do, but in Presidency College also, the researches he did from 1901 till 1915, where he retired, were all on plants, right? So from that point of view, I think yes, he only for 4 years he was a serious physics researcher, but he used physics throughout his life. And now, okay, very interesting thing, he didn't collaborate or communicate with Nikola Tesla, but there was a very important link between the two, which is Swami Vivekananda. So Swami Vivekananda and Tesla had met, and in fact, if you go through Swamiji's letters, right, written after meeting Tesla, his perspective of science suddenly changes. He is talking about Pran and Akash, which is Pran is the the energy in Indian philosophy, and Akash is matter. And in fact, there is an amazing conversation which Vivekananda quotes. He quotes that actually Tesla was very excited after hearing about Akash and Pran, and Vivekananda writes in 1894, which is 10 years before Einstein brought out the special theory of relativity and the E equal to mc square equation, right? So in 1894, Swamiji is writing and he's quoting Tesla as having said that I can prove mathematically that matter and energy are convertible. That is exactly like E equal to mc square, right? So that's amazing that Swami Vivekananda is interacting with Nikola Tesla on something which Einstein would do after 10 years, right? And the same Vivekananda was also very closely associated with Bose, and Bose had read Nikola Tesla's books, because one of the inspirations for doing research on radio was also Nikola Tesla's book. But I haven't found any proof that Tesla and Jagadish Bose would have interacted with each other. But of course, through Vivekananda, they knew, at least Jagadish Bose knew enough of Tesla through Vivekananda, but the other way around, I don't think it's true. And Einstein did meet, Jagadish Bose in 1926. So Einstein and Jagadish Bose both were members of a committee under the League of Nations. The committee was known as International Committee for for Cooperation of Intellectual Property, which later became UNESCO. And in that committee, Jagadish Bose's other members were Einstein, then Marie Curie, Hendrik Lorentz, again, physicist, was a Nobel laureate, and also the philosopher, Henry Bergson, the French philosopher. So Jagadish Bose was also a member of that, and in Geneva, when he first went there, he was so extremely popular that in the lecture which he gave, Einstein had to jostle for a seat. And after hearing the lecture where he talked about unity, about life in plants and animals and human beings, Einstein was so thrilled that he told to the newspaper that only for this research, this guy should have a statue in every European university. So that's about it.
What a brilliant way to end this session. Everyone here, this is a brilliantly researched book. And as you could make out, that Sudipto doesn't make any claim in the book that is not verifiable through data and evidence and research. So thank you, Sudipto, for presenting us with this brilliant book, making us all very proud as Indians and as Bangalis. So thank you very much.
Thanks
and
a lot, everyone.
as always, a great pleasure speaking to you. And a big thanks to Apeejay Kolkata Literary Meet. Big thanks to Anjum for having us here.